our State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It was a busy week in Alabama politics. We'll start with the big news on redistricting. Court-appointed Special Master Richard Allen this week submitted 3 proposed congressional district maps to the federal court panel overseeing Alabama's redistricting case. They're all similar in that they alter the 1st and 2nd congressional districts to bring black voting age population up to near a majority in the 2nd district. The 1st district would extend all the way to the Georgia line, and the 2nd district would dip into the city of Mobile. The 3-judge panel is expected to respond to the proposed maps soon. And one of these maps is likely to be the final one used for the 2024 election cycle. That's because the U.S. Supreme Court this week denied Alabama's emergency request to proceed with the maps drawn by the legislature. That ruling was a big win for plaintiffs who brought the case, arguing that Alabama should have more than one congressional district in which black voters have a chance to elect a candidate of their choice. Plaintiff Evan Milligan called the ruling, quote, a victory for all Alabamians. Attorney General Steve Marshall vowed to continue defending the legislature's map as the full case proceeds, and said what the court is allowing amounts to a, quote, racially gerrymandered court-drawn map. We'll have more conversation about the redistricting issue later in the show. Another state lawmaker has been indicted, the 3rd this year so far. State Representative John Rogers of Birmingham has been charged by a federal grand jury with 2 counts of obstruction of justice. The charges stem from the longtime lawmaker's involvement in a kickback scheme involving state grant money and a local charity. Former State Representative Fred Plump resigned from the legislature earlier this year after being charged in the same federal case. Rogers expressed confidence after those charges were announced, telling reporters that he looks forward to his day in court. That House District 55 seat that Plump vacated had a special election to fill it this week. There will be a runoff in the Democratic primary between Travis Hendricks and Sylvia Swain. Hendricks carried about 28% of the vote to Swain's 21% in that Birmingham district. That runoff will take place on October 24th. There is no Republican running. There was also a special election in House District 16. Republicans Brad Cox and Brian Brinyark each received about 32% of the vote and will also go to a runoff on October 24th. The winner will face Democrat John Underwood. This week, we learned the final price tag of the first of 2 new men's prisons being built by the state. The Prison Finance Authority met this week to finalize the agreement that allows the state to spend $1.08 billion to build the Elmore County facility. Alina Arbuthnot of Maynard Nexon, who assisted in finalizing the deal, explained that some of the increased costs come from changes in scope during the design phase to add additional capabilities and satisfy court directives.
In general, the change in the design phase cost has been because of changes that we have requested and adjustments that they've had to make to continue design. Whenever we make an adjustment in the scope of the construction work, generally that corresponds to a change in the design phase some as well, because they'll need to do some engineering with respect to that.
Okay. State Representative Rex Reynolds, who chairs the House General Fund Committee, acknowledged that the costs were far greater than expected, but said the state would be able to handle it.
Well, certainly, and I publicly agree with what Chairman Albritton said. We've got to continue to focus on the 2nd prison also. It'll make a huge difference in our corrections system overall. We have about $1.235 billion currently on hand to pay for this prison, so we'll have some additional surplus, at least as to what's on hand versus what it'll take to finish this prison up. So all that'll move for the 2nd prison. We'll have to watch the bond market, potentially go back to the bond market and gain additional little over $200 million if we could from the bond market. And then we've got to focus on it. You know, we are certainly up in revenue right now over 23, over 22 numbers. And we'll have to capture some of that supplemental to set aside to move forward on that 2nd prison. But we have the cash on hand today to complete the dollar amount we heard today, so we'll continue to move on.
Lawmakers took a big step towards the construction of a new state house this week. The Legislative Council, a joint House and Senate panel that owns the State House, voted unanimously to enter into an agreement with the Retirement Systems of Alabama for the design and construction of a new home for the legislature. State Senator Sam Gavan, who chairs the council, explained that the current building is in disrepair and cannot adequately accommodate the public.
This building has tremendous problems. It is not functional, and I think that it's very well covered. I think the media has done a good job of acknowledging that. I think it's important to make a good presentation for the state of Alabama and to make the committee rooms accessible. There's so many of these committee rooms that the public can't get in when they really have a concern about what's going on and they can't get in the room. It's not right to have a state house where basically the lobbyists that know where they're going and to get here early get all the seats. And, it just needs to be the people's house. We need some large rooms. Like right now we only have room 200 where we have a real large crowd in there that we can accommodate a decent-sized crowd. So I think we'll have some more conference rooms. We'll also have a lot less dead space. This building's got a lot of dead space. We've got to heat and cool it and maintain it, which you haven't been doing a very good job of maintaining it over the years. I mean, the deferred maintenance on this building is pushing $100 million, as I recall. So, and that's just it's not going to get any better on the elevator. I mean, that's where you've got parts for the elevator. How much longer are they going to make those things? There's a lot of things like HVAC units, are they going to be continued? So it's time to start a new building. And I think, I've not gotten any pushback from constituents on it. It's been covered pretty well in the press. And, I don't think there's a pushback against it. I think people want something they can be proud of.
Gavan also said the legislature has a lot of trust in RSA for this project because of their track record with building several other significant buildings in downtown Montgomery.
When you start looking at the return that they've got and you look at what market interest rates are right now and you look at effectively they are our general contractor. We're not paying for a general contractor. And those rates can vary widely, but you're not going to get the interest and the general contractor for 8%. So I think that is a value, and I think you've got to also look at this and look. It can't ever be totally about personalities. Okay, RSA is bigger than David Bronner, but the fact that remains is. I think his track record has proven that he wants things to make a good impression for the state of Alabama, and he wants to lift up Alabama as a whole. And I think that I have the confidence that that's exactly what he's going to do. He's not. This is not some joyride that he's taken. This is something that he believes should have happened a long time ago, and I think he's got that commitment to it to do the program.
This week saw the first meeting of the state's Opioid Settlement Oversight Committee. Alabama was awarded more than $270 million from the opioid settlement negotiated by Attorney General Steve Marshall. The 16-member committee was established to make recommendations to the legislature on how best to spend that money. The panel heard presentations from several state agencies, plus experts on addiction and treatment. Bureau of Pardons and Paroles Director Cam Ward said addressing opioid addiction is the number one way to keep formerly incarcerated people from reoffending and going back to prison.
If you want to cut recidivism in half and promote public safety, it's real simple. Mental health, drug treatment, and job training. It's a three-legged stool. You have to have all three. You can't do one by itself. Because what we have seen in our data is if you go through the drug treatment or the mental health plus job training, the recidivism rate in our programming has shown you go from 30% to 4%. It works. Treatment and intervention and programming, like we've heard from the previous agencies up here, it just works.
When we look at emergency rooms for just fentanyl overdoses, dramatic spike. It's overwhelming when you look at these numbers. It's frightening when you do. I've been told by the people who should know that on the street you will find any substance contaminated with fentanyl, from marijuana to cocaine to what looks like a Percocet pill, what looks like a Xanax pill, but they're illicitly manufactured and pill presses used, and it's got fentanyl in it. So, and we're, in other parts of the country, they're seeing even more potent substances.
I think that we had some great presentations today. I think the commission is going to come back together in private, talk about where we can place the money to get really the best return on our investment to help the most amount of people throughout the state of Alabama. And by doing that, I think that we're being able to invest those dollars wisely for the money that we got in. It's not unlimited funds, and so our goal is to make sure that we place the money exactly where it can help the most people.
Turning to Washington, where Congress appears headed toward a government shutdown. That would happen Sunday if there is no last-minute spending agreement. Some in the Alabama delegation are seeking to use the funding negotiations to enact policies that beef up security at the southern border. U.S. Senator Katie Britt gave an impassioned speech about the situation at the border, calling on President Biden to take it more seriously.
One of the things that you touched on at the very beginning is that Democrats say we have no solutions. I guarantee you, if you take a look at this group up here, we have put forth solution after solution after solution. I mean, you look at H.R. 2 and what you're trying to move here in the Senate. You look at the work you've done. Guys, I would have never seen the border firsthand if this woman didn't know that I needed to see it immediately upon entering the United States Senate. I followed up with a trip with John Cornyn because they care. These people down there, Senator Blackburn would talk to them. She knew them. We walked through and we got to hear women tell us their story. And their stories are brutalizing. And to Senator Cruz's point, if you're not telling it, that's on you. Because when a woman sits there and she tells you not just about being raped, but how many times a day she's raped, when she tells you about having to lay in that bed while they come in and out and in and out, it's disgusting and it's despicable. Folks, you look at the number of people that have died at the border because Joe Biden has made it more and more enticing to come here. Make no mistake, this is a result of failed policies. We could fix this. We can't throw money at this and fix it. We have to actually change the policies.
On the House side, Alabama Congressman Mike Rogers and Dale Strong grilled Pentagon officials about the recent decision to reverse course and permanently locate the Space Command in Colorado Springs rather than Huntsville. Rogers, who chairs the House Armed Services Committee, called the decision blatantly political and said he wouldn't approve any more funding from being sent to Colorado for the Space Command.
What I want to point out about where we are now is we don't live in a monarchy. We live in a constitutional republic. The president doesn't get to just from high on decide this is the way it's going to be, and we all just sit by and say, yes, sir. Those in his employ must do that. But we are an equal branch. The judicial branch, the legislative branch now gets its say-so. The president can intervene and tell his department personnel what he wants to do. Congress gets to decide what we're going to authorize and what we're going to pay for. It is my intent to make sure that the competition results are honored and that the permanent basing headquarters are authorized and funded to be constructed in Huntsville, Alabama. And during that period of time, the provisional headquarters in Colorado Springs is fully funded until that completion is made. But we have seen some real concerns raised here today. There is no reason to justify what's happened other than, in my view, political considerations. So I'm going to do what my colleague from Colorado Springs, his delegation did when they felt like President Trump had incorrectly intervened, and I'm going to ask the Inspector General from the Department of Defense to investigate this. In the meantime, I intend to work to make sure that no funds are authorized or expended to be spent in Colorado Springs for the building of a permanent headquarters.
It's no secret that the electric vehicle market is growing, with more EVs and hybrids hitting the road every day. Here in Alabama, the state is trying to prepare for a more electric future. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott reports.
The electric vehicle movement is rolling toward Alabama. If you look closely, that car or pickup truck next to you may be a hybrid or all-electric vehicle. EV popularity in Alabama is rising.
What comes along with that are good-paying jobs. And Governor Ivey's all about making sure that the economics and those jobs are kept in the state of Alabama.
Kenneth Boswell serves as the director of the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs, or ADECA. His agency is monitoring EV usage in Alabama.
By supporting the EV infrastructure and the EV industry, then we make sure that our constituents and our Alabamians that are employed by the auto manufacturers get to maintain those or retain those jobs, as well as possibly being able to grow jobs into the future.
According to the Alabama Department of Commerce, Alabama is one of the top 5 automotive manufacturing states in America. And like many other companies, the state is also turning its attention toward electric vehicles. And to do so, Alabama wants to upgrade its infrastructure. That means grant money from Washington, D.C. to make changes.
The federal government actually came down with the Navy funds, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure dollars, and it's $79 million over a 5-year period of time, and those dollars will concentrate on our interstates.
In other words, more places for people with EVs to recharge their vehicles.
Those charging stations will be located 50 miles apart, no more than 1 mile off the interstate. We have a secondary plan that we have turned into the Department of Energy, and they have accepted to amend the plan that if there's any dollars that are left over from the Navy funding, then we'll use those on state highways as well as county roads.
With more electric vehicles hitting Alabama roadways, the state wants to be ready for recharging issues.
We call it range anxiety, and that's what we want to dispose of, is to make sure that we follow industry and those EVs hitting the marketplace, but them having the resources to be able to, it's like gasoline cars. There's a gas station on every corner. So we want to make sure that we have the adequate infrastructure in place to support the automotive industry and that EV purchaser, that they can actually map their trip from point A to point B without any anxiety.
For Capital Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Joining me next is State Senator Greg Albritton, Chairman of the Senate Ways and Means General Fund Committee. Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Well, I wanted to have you on for a lot of reasons, but top of the list has to be talking about prisons, and specifically prison construction. We had the Prison Finance Authority meeting this week. Learned that, well, I guess it was last week we learned that costs for this just the Elmore County facility were going to go from $623 million to $975 million. Then we learned that's actually going to go up. Final costs are going to go up to $1.08 billion. That's a lot more than we originally intended. What was your basic reaction to hearing that from the commissioner?
Thank goodness for my heart palpitation medications. No, yeah, you're correct that the cost has gone way up. There are several reasons involved with that, but I will mention the cost that we got in today, the $1,083,000,000 figure, is actually lower than the projected estimate that was shared back in June. In that point, it was 1.09 some odd figure, which was even more difficult because it wasn't too long before that when we were given the $975 million, which was tough enough that was a 30% increase or so.
Right.
So it's been an escalation that has been difficult, but it's there.
And reasons that were mentioned, inflation is the big one, increased cost of materials. We hear these kind of things all the time. supply chain issues and things like that. It still seems like it's tough to swallow these are taxpayer dollars going to prisons. It's tough to get taxpayers to want to pay for prisons anyway, and you talk about this increased cost.
Part of that, if I may speak to that for a moment, part of that was if you remember, we've been working on this problem for some time. I think for more than 5 years, we've been trying to test out things. We've had bills in the House and in the Senate trying to move forward something, and then the governor had a release plan that we're working on. But from that number, and then when we've passed this bill in 21, if you look, the numbers that we had initially, when was that, 19 or 16, I think it was, when we initially started this argument, when we finally passed it in 21, those numbers had not changed at all. Very, very little change.
It was before inflation. It was
before inflation. It was
COVID.
Before the COVID. It was before lots of things before us. But there was no built-in mechanism, or there was no recognition of how circumstances may change. But when they change dramatically.
Right. Well, I know hindsight's 20/20, but I think most everybody would say, man, if we could go back to 2015, 2016, when this stuff was really just kind of getting started. But even going back to 2019, the governor had her lease to own sort of situation. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but prison lease situation. Legislature really had a lot of resistance to that. Is there, should we have maybe gone along with that? Would that have fixed a little bit of this? I guess that was 2019.
Yeah, 2019. No, in fact, I'm afraid if we had gone with that, we may have been even worse off because at least we're building on our own land. We don't have the cost of capital purchase of property that was in the lease plan, nor do we have the escalation clauses, which we were required to pay not only the cost of the capitalization, but also additional fees. I'm afraid that that would have been even worse off if we had gone with that plan at this point. So I think what we did was the correct thing to do. And mistakes were made. We hadn't built a prison in 50 years. There was a learning curve here, and we had to learn that.
Well, speaking of that learning curve, so that we're just talking about the Elmore County Prison.
Correct.
The Escambia County, the second men's prison is Escambia County, your neck of the woods. I know that there is site work being done. But are there lessons from the Elmore project that can be applied to Escambia to avoid cost overruns like we've seen?
I think so. For number one, one thing that we'll have at the completion of this project, if you will, by that I mean the next 6 to 8 weeks, we should have all the plans in hand, and those plans will be ours. And then we can take those plans as a duplication. Now, I'm a little part-time legislator. I can't, tell everybody what to do in regard to this, but it is my hope and my plan is being discussed that we use those plans that we have already bought and paid for and all the studies with that and apply it directly to the Escambia, minus the medical, minus the mental health and the training. All that would be separated out. So we wouldn't have those costs. Plus we're building it on property that's already been approved and such and gone through those processes. So we're ahead of the game on Escambia more than we were with the Elmore.
Okay. Switching gears, let's talk about redistricting just for a minute. I know you weren't on the redistricting committee, but you were part of the process in terms of voting on all those plans.
I tried to be. Yeah.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Well, interesting way to put it. But we obviously have the Supreme Court. We have the maps from the special master.
Yeah, I saw those.
The Supreme Court denying the state's request for a stay. What were your basic takeaways from those maps? I mean, these are congressional districts, and I know you have to have relationships with these congressmen.
Correct. The best word I can describe is disappointment. This in South Alabama it seems like no matter what district line, South Alabama is the scapegoat, if you will, and where all the lines change dramatically. I mean, not just a little line here, a little line there. It's whole counties that get broken up or changed out and such. It's a volatile matter down there for us, and to have these changes occur as dramatic as they have is disappointing. Cuts Mobile not quite in half, but it jiggles through and gerrymanders, if you will, into areas down in there. It reaches all the way across to Dothan. It's disappointing that we've broken up the districts in such a draconian way.
Mm-hmm. Are you hearing from you and your colleagues any, I don't know, regret of taking the course that you did instead of really maybe trying to get closer to that, what the three-judge panel ordered? Seemed like kind of a risk going with just 39% in that second district.
Well, you're right, Todd. But if you look on some of that, but we were given a task that was impossible to meet, in my personal estimation. You try to draw lines according, as we felt, that would have identifiable trends, identifiable lines, identifiable to connections. And we thought we did a pretty good job. The court disagrees. So while we have the constitutional to do so, evidently they feel they have the judicial review opportunity to do differently. Yep. Maybe that's to be continued, fought over, but right now we have these. One of these three will probably be selected.
Right. Oh, I think you're right. This is going to be litigated for years to come. While I've got you, you are the Budget Committee chairman. You've had y'all have had a lot of these review hearings on ARPA funds.
Yes.
And I'm curious, I've heard you state some concerns about, that deadline that once seemed very far away on 2026.
It's coming up quick.
Really doesn't seem that far away anymore, especially when you think about the magnitude of these projects. What are you hearing from ADEM, from ADECA about these projects? Is there concern that we might leave money on the table?
They are aware, the agencies are aware of our concerns, that the last thing we want is to allow money to go unused. We want that money is in Alabama. We want that in the ground in Alabama. So they have made preparations. They have developed processes and methods so that at particular time points we can redirect that monies into more feasible methodologies, those that are more prepared or those that are ready to be spent, so that we can use those funds without any of it going back. That's a very sensitive matter. That's why we're having the hearings that we're having, so that we can keep the light shining where it needs to be and it doesn't get escaped away.
Yeah. Well, no, it's good to have that sunshine, that public scrutiny, and these are, after all, taxpayer dollars, and for such a massive investment. I mean, you're talking just billions of dollars. You certainly do want that to go to some public good. And there were some great projects. I mean, you talk about all the broadband needs, all the
exactly
water and sewer infrastructure.
We put more. This would be more in water and sewer infrastructure in Alabama than we've ever been able to put. This will be generational. We just got to be able to get it in.
So it would be a disappointment if the clock ran out on
Exactly. Now, we've done this before. If you remember the CARES that came in, that we also had that same restriction and such, and we had means, and we copied that same methodology so that we'll have the opportunity to redirect so that we can spend it. We've done it before. I think we're on target.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, we're out of time. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Joining me next is State Senator Bobby Singleton, the minority leader of the Alabama Senate. Senator, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Thank you.
Been a big week here in Alabama politics. One of those kind of crazy weeks where all this was happening at the same time. I wanted to start with the prison Finance Committee meeting this week. I guess finalized we got the final cost on what this prison in Elmore County is going to cost. $1.082, I think.
Correct.
$billion. Big cost increases, since where we started at, 620 something million. What was your reaction to that? Or, did you see these increases coming?
Yes, being a part of the committee and being a member the minority party, we've been kind of watching this. We put that minority language in there, trying to make sure that minority. So I meet with the constructors out on the construction site. I've met with them at least twice this summer, just last week prior to the meeting that we had this week. And I was looking at in terms of hearing from them in terms of where the cost was based on inflation. Then there was some cost overruns and things of that nature. And so, I mean, it's good that we're finally coming to a firm number, so we can kind of stop the bleeding there. Because when you start looking at the cost and what was going up, supply chain, it was just going up and up and up. And I think what we're starting to see now is the inflation start to go down just a little bit. And so with that 1.02 billion, it's above the number that we want to be, just north of $1 billion. But I think it's something that we're very cautious about. While I don't like it, but it's something I think is within the range we can work with.
Does it mean we should take a different approach when it comes to that Escambia prison? Because that's the next one, right?
Exactly. And, I think the second one, I've been hearing from other members talking about instead of design build, maybe we just need to bid it out and see what the prices are going to be. And you start to get those kind of things. And we're right now at 90% of design. And both of these facilities are going to be, on both campuses, are going to be basically the same minus the healthcare facilities that's over here in Otago County. Mm-hmm. And so if you take that same design and put it down there in Escambia, maybe we can save a lot of costs on design and engineering. You also got the environmentals that are moving forward down there. So we may be able to save a little money here and there, but we should not go above that number.
Mm-hmm. Switching gears, you were also, another meeting this week was the Legislative Council.
Yes.
Kind of moved forward, took the next step on finally building a new state house. It's one of those things that nobody wants to take that vote, to build a new state house, because maybe it's not politically popular, but goodness, it's needed. But I thought it was interesting that it was a unanimous vote, right? No, not even arguing or anything. Everybody seemed to be on the same page with allowing RSA to take the next step in this project.
Well, it's a great approach that we're doing. RSA, our retirement system, has been into the building business for some time now. If you come around Montgomery, see all the green tops. Those are buildings that RSA does and put leases out on them over a period of time and amortize them down to where state government can be able to do it without going into budgets, and we'll be able to do it. I applaud Dr. Bronner for what he's doing to be able to build the state with that kind of capital he's using. It is much needed. We're sitting in a building that has mold, mildew. When it rains, it floods in our basement and things of that nature. It's uncomfortable in here, cold, in the winter, and it's hot in the summer sometimes. And so we do a new building. Most states around have started building new buildings around, bringing up to modern types of building. And I think that's what you saw, was members understanding what we were up against. People are getting sick because of the mold mm-hmm. and things that are in this building. And so I think it's just by time for us to be able to go into something new mm-hmm. and different.
Oh, can't wait. It's going to be interesting to see. And you're right about Dr. Bronner and RSA. They're first class
yes.
in what they do. Let's talk redistricting. Mm-hmm. That was the big bombshell this week. We had the maps come out from the special master. Then the next day, the ruling from the Supreme Court, which means one of these maps is going to be the newest. What was your reaction seeing these maps and seeing the ruling and knowing that what the legislature passed is not going forward? It's going to be different.
Well, I wasn't surprised because I was a part of the court hearings. I was there. I sat through the court hearings and I heard the state case in terms of what they presented, and I heard the judges' responses to the state and how they saw what was going on and how the maps that was presented to them in court and the evidence that was being put on by the Milliken group. And also there was a hearing on the Singleton case the next day that was also the judges thought that here we are getting some of the same information, but yet still, even though it was different maps, but we're talking about the same thing, trying to get the same results. So therefore, the state put on basically the same kind of case with both of the clients. And so I wasn't so much surprised of that, but while we're going into this, and I think that we must be very cautious about how we go into it, how we build infrastructure. This is a new territory for in the District 2.
You're talking about, the second congressional district
congressional
is
district.
probably going to be, it's meant to be an opportunity district for
Yes,
black voters.
yes. When you look at the 7th is basically almost the same. You know, you get some of the same county, the familiar, you will have the incumbent Congresswoman Sewell, who's running in that. And so you're going to have a brand new district where there is no incumbent. So it's going to be fair play in there. So we're going to have to get in there and do the work and make sure that we get the work done to make sure that that opportunity is there and that we can win.
All the way from Russell County, Phoenix City on the Georgia line to Mobile on the Mississippi line. That's quite a district. You know, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's quite a district, but yet it's still, the feat is not impossible. It's just going to take the work. That's why you got to have good candidates. People want to get in there, get to work, get some name recognition, get out there and run the kind of campaign, build a complete infrastructure, knowing that people in that district has not voted for an African American in years in terms of at this level of government. And so we just got to get out there and make it happen.
All right, well, I've got to ask you, speaking of candidates, you made some waves this week saying that you're considering at least maybe running for Congress in that 7th district, potentially challenging Congresswoman Sewell. How serious are you?
I say I still consider it. You know, we're looking at it. You know, I think that, you know, being from the Black Belt, you know, born and raised and being of the Black Belt. I'm not just from the Black Belt, but I'm of the Black Belt. And I'm there every day, you know, dealing with people and, you know, hearing the cry from folks and you know, going through the worst tornadoes that we've ever gone through, trying to help people rebuild and those things. The schools, pandemic, no internet, no access, and all of that stuff. So when you're from it, you want to stay close to it, you know, and where people can touch you. But at the end of the day, we have not been getting a lot of federal dollars in that area. And so we need, that's why I presented a map during the redistricting that gave the Black Belt its own, so we can concentrate on those unique problems that we have on our own. And so we just want to make sure that we have somebody who can represent us. I think that with the community interest between Jefferson County and the Black Belt is far apart when you start to looking at it. But yet it's still, because we have what we have here now, you know, I think I can get in there and represent that district and do a great job. But at the end of the day, I'm just still thinking about it. You know,
what's your timetable like? How soon would you have to decide?
Well, I think.
Qualifying's like in November or something, isn't it?
Well,
but
qualifying here in September.
Okay.
Like Friday week or so, we're like that. And then it ends like November 10th, somewhere in that area. Okay. And so there's time. And I'm putting together an exploratory committee, talking to good friends and people and constituents and seeing what they want. You know, look, the Congresswoman have a lot of people like that who love her also, okay, who trust in her and believe in her, and who love me just the same. So there are people who feel like their houses may be split. So I just want to be able to say where we are and do the best for it. I feel like where I am in the state, I made some great inroads here in the state, been a minority leader in the Senate, worked really, really well with the other side of the party, trying to make sure that we get things for our community here. And so, you know, going to Washington is something that I've never just really wanted to do. But for the people, if the people say that, hey, Bobby, we want you to be there based on this exploratory committee, then we'll look at it.
Fascinating. And I'm actually hoping to have her on the show next week. So, but it's political time, you know. We've had such a political week between the maps and the ruling and all this. It's really interesting to see it all getting started. We're out of time, but Senator, thanks again for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Joining me next is State Representative Chris Pringle from Mobile, the Speaker Pro Tem of the Alabama House of Representatives. Mr. Pringle, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
I finally have you. We've been trying to get you on to talk about redistricting for a while, but there's a reason why y'all didn't want to really speak a lot publicly about these maps and the whole process because of litigation, right?
Exactly. I mean, if you remember, I had lawsuits filed against me in 2021 before I ever even introduced a map. I mean, the litigation was there.
So the advice of counsel is, you know, whatever you say publicly can be part of the court case and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, now haven't completely resolved it, right?
No.
The Supreme Court still could hear the case, but we have the ruling from the Supreme Court saying these maps, the map that was passed by the legislature will not be allowed to go forward. We're going forward with these special master proposed maps. We don't know which one yet. Give me your basic reaction to that and what you see from these maps that are proposed by the special master.
You know, what they ruled originally was there was a likely violation of Section 2 in the original maps we passed in 2021. And now they said that what we passed in the special session did not remedy the previous violation. So they appointed a special master, and he's turned over. We were under the impression that the special master was going to turn over 3 different maps for the court to decide. And what the special master actually did was took the plaintiff's VRA plan and gave 3 different versions of that one plan.
They do look very similar. There's variations in like Houston County, Henry County, and then how much do you go into Mobile with the 2nd District? But really, that's kind of it.
Yeah, it really depends on what they decided to racially gerrymander. I mean, I think 2 of the plans racially gerrymander Houston County. All of them racially gerrymander Mobile County. And of course, they racially gerrymander Tuscaloosa County also.
Yeah, well, but that's not supposed to happen, right?
You know, the whole interesting process, Section 2 clearly says, nothing in this law, the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, says minorities should be entitled to representation based on the percentage of their population. Now we have a court ruling that says you have to give them representation based on the percentage of their population. So this is going to affect Alabama. Alabama will be racially gerrymandered under these maps. Louisiana will not have to be racially gerrymandered, and so will South Carolina.
Well, I was talking to the Attorney General about this, and I certainly think, even if it's not Alabama's case, the Supreme Court is eventually going to have to, figure this out, because there are questions as to Section 2, as to the 14th Amendment, and how, states need clarity. But we do have clarity, at least in the short term, going forward. But let's go back to the special session on redistricting. That was a slog, right? It was just miserable for everybody, and probably most of all for you, because you worked really hard on all this, tried to get it all going. But it was ultimately a different map. It wasn't yours. It was a Senate map influenced by the Attorney General's office that actually got passed. Talk to me about that special session, what y'all were trying to do, and was there any frustration in terms of, were y'all trying to do what the court asked versus trying to get a court case going?
And working with my demographer and my legal counsel leading up to that special session, we produced a map, the Community of Interest Plan, that we thought complied with the court order. It gave the Democrats an opportunity to win in the 2nd Congressional District. And we had the numbers to prove that there was a 50-50 chance they could win. And I thought that was what we were going to go with. After we came out of that committee meeting on Monday, the Attorney General's office decided to start meeting with the senators and convince the senators that they had a better plan, that they could produce a better map, that compactness would override Section 2 violations, and convince the senators to go with it. Now, the House passed my plan, and the Senate passed their plan, and they made it clear that they were not going to pass mine, so we had to, the House had to acquiesce and pass the Senate's plan.
Now, in his statement after the Supreme Court ruling, the Attorney General said it's clear that no proposed plan would have passed court muster. Do you agree with him, or do you think your plan would have gotten close?
My plan would have had a better chance. And I've said this from the start. Mine was a 50-50 chance at best. Because, I had other constraints. I had members of Congress to appease. I had 140 members of the legislature to appease.
Sure.
Our guidelines clearly say we need to keep the core of the districts together. We don't pair incumbents against each other. And those are things that the special master didn't have to worry about.
That's right, because that's really the big factor that I see when they put Coffee County in the 1st District on all the plans, on all 3 of the maps. Coffee County's in the 1st District. Well, that's one thing y'all were trying not to do, was put Barry Moore and Jerry Carl in the same district. Well, if you don't have Coffee County to worry about, man, you've got lots of different populations that you can shift around.
Exactly. We were under much tighter constraints than the special master was. Because again, our guidelines and traditional redistricting principles, maintain the existing districts as much as possible. And remember, these existing districts were put in by the court in the 90s. All we've done since then is just adjust them for population deviation. In fact, I want to point this out to you. When Eric Holder was the Attorney General of the United States of America, he pre-cleared our congressional plans under Section 5 when we still had Section 5 pre-clearance.
This is the 2011 plans?
Yeah. And once he left the Justice Department, he was hired by this Democrat litigation group. I think it's been funded by George Soros. They've got like $300 million to bring these lawsuits all over the state. Once he pre-cleared us, said you're fine with Section 2 and the 14th Amendment, went to this new Democrat congressional litigation thing, and then turned around and sued me and said that your plan violates Section 2 and the 14th Amendment. I mean, he's just getting paid. This is an effort all over the nation to sue every southern state and force these type of plans to be drawn.
I understand that, and because I have asked those on the other side the question, like, why was it okay for 20 years to have that one majority-minority district, but now it's not okay, you have to have two. And it's, Chris England says, well, populations have shifted and everything, but I think there's a shift in jurisprudence. Ultimately, the Supreme Court's going to have to answer. And I think that's maybe getting us to a problem. You know how the Dobbs decision for abortion was just this huge deal nationally? Well, whenever something gets up to the Supreme Court, it's probably not going to be the Alabama case. Maybe it's Louisiana. Maybe it's South Carolina or North Carolina. But if they have to change, how districts are drawn and everything, it could be like a huge national shift as well. It could be a huge impact. Do you see what I'm saying?
In the 90s, when we were drawing congressional districts and we were drawing particularly legislative districts, we were drawing minority districts at like 60-64%. If you go back and look at what we call the Reed-Buskey plan, Joe Reed and James Buskey, the black House members and senators, they had like 60+% of BVAP in their districts. And in 2000
by design.
Yeah, by design. Yeah, we were packing all the blacks into these legislative districts, and Reed said he wouldn't settle for anything other than 28% of the House districts being represented by blacks because of the population in the state. So, and we did that in the 90s, and we've held that as best we can. But let me point out, we have 2 majority black districts that have elected white men to them.
Well, and that goes to some of the polarized voting, and we can get to that. But let me just ask you, why not? Why not have 2, based on the state's population, right? 28% black.
27.
27, 28. Okay. Well, why not? I mean, that's a good argument, right? Why not have 2 congressional districts that are majority black or close to it?
And that's true, but remember this. The census changed the definition of black in the census. Now, if you have any black blood in you, you're just considered black for the census purposes. Therefore, the black population increased. It's because of change in the census. But you don't have 27% compact and contiguous. Remember, you've got a large minority population outside of Anniston. You got a very large minority population outside of Madison that you can't, up in Madison County, you can't get to. So what they're having to do is come into the southern part of the state and twist and distort and rip counties and cities apart to go try and find as many as minorities as they can in order to, they're not even at 50%, they're only at 48% on 2 of them. Mm-hmm. But they've stretched and tugged and pulled to find black voters so tight, and they're using a bunch of counties that have declining populations. I mean, Dallas County in the last census lost like 6,500 people. Every one of those counties lost between 1,500 and 2,000 people in the last census. So in 2030, you've maxed it out. When we go back and redraw in 2030, there's no place to go find black people. So you're going to have to add white people into it to get the deviations back to where they need to be, and you're going to have a majority white district.
Well, let's fast forward to the next redistricting. Mm-hmm. Another census, maybe Alabama grows more, population shifts, things like that. Are you hopeful that we do have more clarity from the Supreme Court in terms of what we're supposed to do? I just heard a lot of conflicting things from redistricting.
It's extremely confusing. And I will, the genius of our founding fathers and the sheer genius of having a decennial census to adjust for this change of population, this moving and shifting, and the whole reapportionment and redistricting process was brilliant. But, in 1947, the Supreme Court said that reapportionment is a political thicket to which the judiciary should not wade, and then they waded into it. And now it's confusing. It's very frustrating. Because, in 2016, 3 federal judges told us we relied too heavily on race in drawing districts and we need to be more race neutral. So we draw them race neutral. Now they're saying, no, you got to rely on race to draw them. And that's the problem. They won't tell you what you can do. They only come back after the fact and tell you did something wrong without a lot of clarity of what you did wrong.
Well, thicket, that's actually where we derive the name Alabama. So that's apropos. I guess we'll leave it there, but we're going to go deeper in the weeds on the podcast. So, Mr. Pringle, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you. Enjoy being back.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Next year marks the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion of Normandy, and the Boaz High School Marching Pirates have been selected to go to Normandy, France, to participate in the festivities. Joining me to talk about it right now are of Boaz High School, Alex Stevenson, the band director, and Lauren Lingerfeld, the assistant band director. Thank y'all for coming on Capital Journal.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, when I first heard about this, it was really just quite the honor. I mean, I've heard of the Macy's Day Parade. I've heard of some inauguration festivities, but to be able to be invited to go all the way to France to participate in such a meaningful ceremony. Alex, I'll start with you. Tell me how this opportunity came about.
Well, we applied to, actually, Ms. Lingerfeld went through the application process, so I may just let her explain.
Okay,
how,
okay. Even better.
All right, we got an application. I filled out the application process, filled out a bio, talked about some of the accolades that we had received recently, and submitted a video presentation, and then we were contacted by the Music Selection Committee chair, who was a retired member of the President's Own United States Marine Band, and notified us that we were selected to perform.
Wow. So what all will this involve? I mean, to go all the way to Normandy, I know that there are going to be huge ceremonies and celebrations for this 80th anniversary.
Well, there are 3 performances. There's the parade in... Remind me of the...
St. Mary Glece.
Yeah, she does a better job with the pronunciations. And then we'll also be performing at the 2 American cemeteries.
So I guess your students must be really excited about this. I mean, when you told them, what were they thinking?
They're over the moon. We actually got it announced. We had Governor Ivey record an address, and we announced it. We played that recording over the loudspeakers at the end of halftime at one of our football games last year.
Oh, very cool.
So they found out along with everybody in the crowd at the same time. So it was a pretty kind of electric thing to have happen.
Oh, I bet. So it goes without saying that a trip like this is going to be really expensive, right? I mean, are you going through a lot of fundraising efforts and things like that? You were telling me about some online efforts.
Right.
Yeah, we've done several different types of fundraisers. Anything that you can think of, we've probably done it. It's going to cost $4,089 per person, and we're taking 140 people with us to Normandy. So it's about $600,000 that we're going to need to raise, and we've raised a considerable amount, but there's still a long way to go. And Boaz is not a wealthy community. This school system is 71% free and reduced lunches, which makes us a Title I, school system. So we are really hoping to get some outside help.
Sure.
With,
well, we'll throw up the QR code where folks can go and check out ways to help, because I understand that. I remember raising money for things and I wanted to do in high school. We certainly want to be raise awareness for you, but this one takes the cake to me. An overseas trip,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what an incredible opportunity for your students. Not just the performance, that alone is incredible, but for the experience of going to Normandy to be a part of all that history must be really thrilling for y'all as educators.
Absolutely.
And, this being the 80th, as time passes, fewer and fewer of these veterans are going to be left.
Right.
And, we're very emphatic on taking advantage of this opportunity for these kids to perform and pay tribute to these heroes that turned the tide of the war.
Right. I'm sure that you got a lot of proud parents, a lot of proud grandparents, and hopefully some boosters that are going to help get the marching pirates to France. Well, look, congratulations. I hope you'll pass that along to your students, and keep us updated. Again, we'll throw up the QR codes so folks can go donate if they can. But we look forward to having video from France of y'all performing in this very special event.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
The 375,000 acres that make up the 3 ranger districts of Talladega National Forest were purchased by the federal government in 1936 as part of an effort to restore clear-cut timberlands and farmlands no longer capable of producing crops. The beautiful reserve includes the 102-mile Pinhoti National Trail System and Alabama's highest and second highest points, Mount Cheaha and Duggar Mountain.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time with more Capital Journal right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.